Hello everybody, my name is Mike Gaudet and welcome back to another installment of Top 5 Albums, the series where I walk you through my 5 favorite albums from every year. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1984, another year that saw the further development of styles like post-punk, gothic rock, synth-pop, industrial, new wave, electronic, and ambient, and another year that produced countless amazing albums, which did make it kind of hard to narrow it down to a top 5. But after a lot of thought and a lot of re-listens to different albums, I have arrived at my definitive top 5 albums of the year 1984. So without further ado, here are my top 5 albums, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Purple Rain by Prince. And it really pains me to have to put this one in the number 5 spot, but at the same time, it really highlights how many incredible albums came out of this year. This is regarded by a lot of people as Prince's best studio album, and I would definitely agree with that. This was the soundtrack to the 1984 movie of the same title, and musically, this was a creative explosion on Prince's part, with lots of really unique instrumental writing and layering between the guitars and the keyboards, as well as a much more dynamic use of different types of synthesizers and drum machines, with this general artsy and psychedelic sort of backdrop that encapsulates the album. It's 9 tracks long, and it features a couple of songs that would be regarded as some of Prince's most classic hits, like the opening track Let's Go Crazy, as well as When Doves Cry, and the closing title track Purple Rain. In addition to these amazing hits, I think the B-sides are just as strong, delivering a diverse palette of sounds and moods, with my personal favorites being I Would Die For You, The Beautiful Ones, and Take Me With You. As far as my favorite songs on here go, I would have to go with When Doves Cry and I Would Die For You. I absolutely love the bass, drum, and keyboard groove on I Would Die For You, and just a song that I find very interesting from an instrumental standpoint. And another element of this record that I find so enjoyable is Prince's incredible guitar playing, and we hear that showcased on Let's Go Crazy, Computer Blue, Darling Nikki, When Doves Cry, and Purple Rain. So I think this album is incredible in every regard. The songwriting, the instrumentation, the innovative use of technology, as well as Prince's amazing guitar playing, and all of those elements combined with the incredibly consistent track listing and the 3 standout and timeless hits that came from this record, I think resulted in the best album of Prince's entire discography. So that is my number 5 album. Now on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. As a guitar player, this was a hugely influential album to me. I remember very vividly when I first heard this when I was a kid. My dad had a really big CD collection when I was a kid, and I used to love just going through it and putting on random albums and seeing what it sounded like. And I remember when I started getting into guitar, my dad told me to check out Stevie Ray Vaughan, so I took this album and put it on, and right from the opening notes of the first track, I was completely hooked, kicking things off with Scuttle Button, which I think is one of the best opening tracks of any guitar record, completely bringing the listener in and showcasing the very impressive chops of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And after that, the album delivers 7 more incredible tracks, all within that traditional and Texas blues sort of realm. And side 1 almost plays through like a greatest hits album, with Couldn't Stand the Weather, The Things That I Used to Do, and his legendary cover of the Jimi Hendrix song Voodoo Child. And then side 2 opens up with another classic Stevie Ray Vaughan track titled Cold Shot. And then we change up the pace a bit and go into a beautiful 9-minute minor blues ballad titled Tin Pan Alley. And I absolutely love Stevie's playing on this particular track. The combination of his soulful playing, great use of dynamics, and technical proficiency make for some absolutely incredible solos. And then we change things up again, and the album closes with a track that's actually more in the jazz realm, with an original by Stevie titled Stang's Swang, a super interesting song that's more outside of the box in the grand scheme of the Stevie Ray Vaughan discography, and hearing him play over more of a jazz sort of feel is a really cool thing, and I think he does it very effectively, and I really like the inclusion of this track on this record. I think it provides some really nice stylistic variety and a little bit of a different flavor that we're not used to hearing from Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I think it's an incredible closer to an amazing album that really contains everything that you want to hear from Stevie Ray Vaughan, between the virtuosic guitar playing, the amazing amazing originals and rock-solid covers, and a track listing that I think is pretty much perfect from front to back, with the perfect combination of consistency and a little bit of variety that really keeps things interesting. And in my opinion, this is the best album of the Stevie Ray Vaughan discography. And as a guitar player, if I was making a list of my top 10 favorite guitar albums that had a big influence on me, this record would easily make that list. So that is my number 4 album. Now on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Swoon by Prefab Sprout. This is the debut studio album to come from this English Sophisti-pop group, and I really like the stylistic direction that they chose to go in on this particular record. It sounds much different from everything else that would follow it, and because of that, it does hold this special place within their discography. Stylistically, it does contain all of those core elements that are a trademark to the Prefab Sprout sound, between the very unorthodox chord movements and really unique guitar voicings, the colorful vocal melodies and harmonies, the lush instrumentations, the intricate rhythmic grooves, and just the general elements of surprise that are always present when you're listening to Prefab Sprout. And while those elements of surprise are definitely still present on their future albums, I would say it's definitely the most prevalent throughout this record, and this is some really unorthodox and very hard to categorize music. Throughout all of these songs, there are all sorts of interesting feel changes and just stylistic detours that you don't see coming, but they all fit perfectly within this very wacky world of the Prefab Sprout sound, and I think it resulted in one of the most unique and refreshing sounding albums to come out of the year 1984. It's 11 tracks long and takes us through a very fun 40 minutes of music that elicit all sorts of different types of feelings, with some songs that are very driving and groovy. Other songs can be very beautiful and serene, but there's also a good chunk of this album that's very dark and eerie, and I really resonate with that side of the Prefab Sprout sound. And I think it's a very consistent track listing, and contains 2 songs in particular that I regard as some of my favorite Prefab Sprout songs, with Green Isaac and Cruel. In my opinion, both of those songs are just art rock masterpieces, and 2 perfect examples of Paddy McAloon's very unorthodox writing style. And a couple of other favorites of mine would be Don't Sing, I Never Play Basketball Now. And if this type of music sounds like it would appeal to you and you're interested in exploring this band more, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so if you're interested in checking that out, be sure to find that in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description. So that is my number 3 album. Now on to number 2. Alright, coming in at number 2 is Brilliant Trees by David Sylvian. This is the debut studio album from David Sylvian, who is most well known as being the frontman for the late 70s and early 80s new wave and art rock group Japan. And I think he completely knocked it out of the park on this first solo album. There are so many things that I love about this record. He veers off into some different stylistic territories compared to where he had left off on the final Japan album. And this album is much more centered in this spacey, ambient, dark, art rock sort of realm, but also contains some elements of funk and jazz on select tracks, which add some additional flavors and create some really nice variety within the track listing. I love the production, which is done by David and Steve Nye, and the songwriting on this is absolutely spectacular, with lots of great instrumental guest features like John Hassel, Ryuichi Sakamoto, Kenny Wheeler, and former Japan members Richard Barberi and Steve Jansen. And the album is only 7 tracks long, with 4 songs on side 1 and 3 songs on side 2, but he packs so much great music within these 7 tracks, giving us the perfect stylistic blend, opening up on a brighter and more groovy note with the track Pulling Punches, an absolutely incredible opener and a personal favorite David Sylvian track of mine. And then after that, we delve into more of the darker ambient sorts of soundscapes, with some jazz flavors sprinkled throughout. And from front to back, I think this is a perfect track listing, not one skip over song, and each track holds a very unique place within the context of the album. In addition to Pulling Punches, my other favorite songs on here would be Brilliant Trees, which I think is the best closing track of any David Sylvian record, And I also really love Weathered Wall and Nostalgia. And albums like these, I think, really provide a breath of fresh air, as there had been a lot of cheesy sounding records that started coming out at this point in the 80s. And I think records like this really hold a unique place within the grand scheme of 80s music. And I would consider this to be one of the best albums of David Sylvian's entire discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on both David Sylvian and Japan's discography, I did 2 videos ranking both of their studio albums. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check out the tier list playlist linked in the comments and the description. So that is my number 2 album. Now for the grand reveal, here is my number 1 favorite album of 1984. Alright, my favorite album of 1984 is Treasure by Cocteau Twins. As I've stated in other videos of mine, Cocteau Twins are one of my personal favorite bands to come out of the 80s, and this would be my favorite album of their discography. I think this is a perfect record from front to back. This was their first album to feature bassist Simon Raymond, and he had also brought some studio experience into the mix, which I think greatly enhanced their sound and production on this record. And I think this album does a great job of capturing a little bit of everything that Cocteau Twins is known for. There are a couple of songs that are in that more dark, dreary, gothic rock sort of realm, with the tracks Persephone, Amelia, and Sicily, and that's a sound that is more similar to the styles that they explored on their first 2 records. But then we also get some more ethereal wave and dream pop vibes on tracks like Lorelei, Pandora for Cindy, Aloysius, and the closing track Dynamo. And in addition to that, there's also a track that gives us some more spacey and ambient moods on the second to last song, Otterlay, and that is a very clear precursor into a sound that they would delve even deeper into on their next studio album. So I think this record has something to offer to everybody, and every single track on this is incredible. There is not one dip in momentum, and the mood and variety from track to track keeps things very interesting and engaging. The production is further enhanced, the songwriting is top-notch, and it contains a good handful of songs that would be my favorite tracks of the entire Cocteau Twins discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on Cocteau Twins' full discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist. So that is my number 1 album of 1984, and to recap, at number 5 we had Purple Rain by Prince, number 4 was Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, number 3 was Swoon by Prefab Sprout, number 2 was Brilliant Trees by David Sylvian, and number 1 is Treasure by Cocteau Twins. If you haven't checked out any of these albums and you give them a listen, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think. And please let me know what your top 5 albums of 1984 are in the comments. I would love to see your lists. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my top 5 favorite albums of 1985. I'll see you then. Take care.